All right, I'm here with comic book writer Mark Russell. You may know him from such works as Second Coming with Richard Pace. Let's see, Edgar Allan's Snifter of Terror. He's done a lot of contributions
Yes,
to
the
that.
Edgar Allan Poe Snifter of Terror. Yeah, I've
Some
done
of
a
my
couple of those. That's
favorite,
where I do my serial mascot stories.
yeah. And you also just finished up your run on Wonder Twins for DC. You've done a lot of one shot or one shots for them too, and currently working on to have a new book coming out. Well, probably have a few coming out, but if they ever come
Yeah,
out again.
they're all exactly. They're all coming out eventually. Hopefully, we'll see. If the industry doesn't implode. Even if it does implode, they'll probably come out at some point.
So, so how did you get into comics? Do you remember the first one that you read that got you hooked on the on
Well,
comics, or what made you want to write them?
I was, Frank. Strangely, it was not my first medium of choice. Like I was more of a novel reader. I read more novels and what literary fiction and stuff. But there were comics that I've really loved. Usually given to me by my friend Bryce, who I'm now working on Killing Red Sonja with. But he was sort of my curator into the world of comics. Like when we were in college, he'd give me, Sandman or V for Vendetta, and really turned me on to the idea that comics were more than just like the Mighty Mouse comics I remembered from when I was a kid.
Right.
That there's actually like a lot of like really meaty stories being told in comics. So I think those were sort of my first introductions. Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore, and what an introduction to have, frankly. There's nothing like getting into a medium knowing you'll never be as good as those guys.
I don't know. I mean, I think one of the first things besides your book, God is Disappointed, that I read from you was probably your run on the Flintstones. And at first I saw that, I was like, the Flintstones, okay, it's going to be cartoony, campy, but it was kind of pretty deep, like most of your comics are, and I
Well, thank
enjoy
you.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, most of my comic titles sound like this is going to be a really bad idea. I was kind of like think the majority reaction when they announced that there was going to be a Flintstones reboot was that most people were like, well, why do we need this? Why, who in their right mind would take on a Flintstones reboot? But to me, I kind of like those titles, or for that matter, like a comic book where Jesus is hanging out with a superhero. But I kind of like those titles. One, because they sort of takes the pressure off, because you've chosen a premise so bad that you can really only go up from there. And also just because I feel like these are the things worth writing, the things that people aren't expecting to be good. You're finding the corners of the literary landscape that haven't been mined because people just assumed there was nothing there.
Well, after you did the Flintstones, I mean, you did another Hanna-Barbera, the Snagglepuss
Yeah.
Exit Stage Left, which that also was very. You took a property that I never thought of it, and made it,
Yeah.
something more than just a cartoon.
No one, and I totally excuse people for this, but no one really thought they would ever want to read a Snagglepuss comic, which was part of the attraction to me for it, because one, it comes with freedom to tell the story you really want to tell, because it's you're not driving your dad's Ferrari, you're driving a broken down VW bus that nobody really cares about. It wasn't the crown jewels of DC. It were these sort of rented cars like Flintstones and Snagglepuss, where they gave me a ton of freedom and allowed me to sort of drive it in any manner that I saw fit. If I come out writing Superman or Batman, I wouldn't have had nearly as much freedom to write. I wouldn't have been able to turn Batman obviously into like a gay Southern Gothic playwright. When you do not have that sort of liberty when you're playing with the crown jewels.
Well, that kind of segues into your Second Coming, which was originally supposed to be. Was it originally supposed to be published through Vertigo or just DC?
Vertigo.
And could
Vertigo
you
specifically.
explain? Okay, could you kind of explain the inspiration for that story and background, and basically, well, I'll let you explain it since you could probably do it better than I could.
Yeah, originally I had two separate ideas. I wanted to do a comic about Jesus Christ coming back to Earth and then being sort of like surprised and appalled at what has been done with his teachings in the last 2,000 years, about him like telling people how they've gotten it wrong. And then I also want to do a comic about like a superhero, ideally, like a Superman-like figure, who realizes, even though he's got, he's basically omnipotent, has all the power in the world, how limiting that is, because it doesn't really solve most of the problems that most of us confront every day. Not being able to pay the rent, having a grandmother who's going through dementia, aren't really things you can fix by being able to fly, or throw somebody through a plate glass window. They don't. Those are very limited powers, and yet those are like almost always the sorts of powers we read about in comic books. Those are the sorts of solutions we're willing to entertain in comics, whereas there's a million other solutions and a million other ways of approaching the world that are probably more fruitful than the sort of superhero violence we see in comics. And the stories tend to get a little stale because they have to sort of come up with conflicts and problems that exist within that sort of narrow range of solutions that superheroes afford. So I want to do a comic that was about the other 99% of human experience. And it occurred to me at some point that these are actually two sides of the same idea about sort of the futility of power, about how Christianity was sort of lost when it became an instrument of the very institutions it sought to subvert, like empire and orthodoxy in religion, and superheroes realizing the futility of their powers because they can't solve the problems that we tend to deal with every day, which really only can be solved with mutual empathy and cooperation. So I pitched it initially as a Superman story. I had a meeting with Marie Javins and Dan DiDio at DC, and I was pitching all of these Superman ideas, and Dan was just like shooting them all down. He's like, no, that's been done. No, that was done 30 years ago. We did that 40 years ago. And at one point he stopped me. He said, look, this is a character that's been around for 80 years. You're going to have a hard time coming up with something that we haven't already done. And then I had this one idea that was just sort of sitting at the bottom of the bag. And I wasn't planning on bringing it out because I thought for sure they would hate it. But I said, well, I have this other idea about, Superman sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with Jesus Christ. And he said, well, that's not been done before. So he's
we have the rights to that character.
Yeah, right. But his point was that he gets death threats when Superman fails to say the Pledge of Allegiance. So he's like, we can't possibly do this as a Superman story. He said, but pitch it as a different character under Vertigo, and we'll publish it as a creator-owned title, which made perfect sense. And it actually really sort of opened up the project for me, because the problem with writing Superman is he's such a great guy. You really have to write him as a great guy. You have to write him as a sort of wonderful man. Whereas I needed Sunstar, the superhero who ended up occupying that role, to be someone who was more vulnerable, somebody who was sort of a narcissist, not a narcissist, but somebody who felt good about having all that power and wasn't very apologetic about it. So he could play more sort of the counterpoint to Jesus Christ, the ultimate figure of empathy and forgiveness. So it worked out well in the end.
So were you expecting the backlash that happened, where people were protesting and
No, not really.
eventually DC dropped the title?
As somebody, as you said, I've written God is disappointed in you, and I didn't get a lot of backlash for that. So I think maybe I was a little naive. But my experience had been writing books, and I think the big difference between writing a book and writing a comic is that people will actually wait till they've read a book to decide that they hate it. Whereas comics, people decide as soon as it's announced whether or not they like it or hate it, which is bizarre to me. So yeah, I got all of this hate before anyone was even able to read a single page of it. And it really kind of took me off guard, especially because it had been announced at San Diego Comic-Con in July of 2018, and there was almost no furore. No one really cared, other than a few hate tweets. And then, like around Christmas, Fox News picked it up and ran with the story that they're doing this horrible, blasphemous comic book in DC. And then then the insanity kind of happened where, it was just like there was a petition to get DC to drop it that ended up getting like 500,000 signatures. Each one of which was auto-generating an angry email to Dan DiDio's inbox. Luckily, he never made me come clean out his inbox. That would have been a nightmare. But it made it very hard for DC to hold on to the comic. And Dan, for his credit, really defended it to the last. He really believed in once, especially once he saw the writing and what it was actually doing. He felt, and I think we all did, that like once people just get a chance to read it, all of this is going to go away. But it just became sort of too hot to get to that point where they could withstand the heat until it actually got to market, which I understand. It probably always was like not a great idea to go to a company or to publish it in a company that exists primarily to sell, movie rights and lunch pails and T-shirts. So it made more sense to publish it at a smaller, more independent label like Ahoy, where any publicity is good publicity, and they don't have like this line of merchandise that's endangered by the fact that they're doing a comic book about Jesus Christ.
So how did you get hooked up with the guys at Ahoy? Because they're a relatively young publisher.
Yeah. I actually was very lucky. I knew Stuart from DC, Stuart Moore. So I saw him in the lobby of my hotel when I was at New York Comic Con, and I just went and said hello. And it turned out he was meeting with Tom Peyer and Hart Seeley from Ahoy. And so he introduced me to them. We just started talking and just sort of hit it off, because it turned out, the way they sort of branded their company to me was sort of a funny Vertigo, which I thought was just right up my alley. When they started talking about their projects, doing more sort of like literary type humor and things about Edgar Allan Poe, it just all sounded completely up my alley. So I began sort of submitting prose stories to them, and also a couple of cartoon stories for the Edgar Allan Poe Snifter of Terror, which became my sort of monster serial fiction that I'm doing with them. So I had this good working relationship with them to begin with. So when the whole thing with Vertigo went down, the Second Coming, they were like kind of the first people I thought of. Was like, well, maybe they would take a chance. And yeah, they were totally into it when I brought it to them. We talked to other publishers as well, but Ahoy just seemed like the most natural fit because they really wanted to do it. And I feel confident that they got the concept.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So how did you get hooked up with Richard Pace, to do the art for the book?
Oh, that started with Vertigo. Molly Mahan, who was the editor on the project at the time, she recommended Richard and sent me some of his work. And the thing that sort of appealed to me about Richard's artwork was that he's very good with facial expressions. He's very good with like sort of the subtlety of emotions that go on a person's face, which I think is absolutely critical for any comic I do, but especially a comic that I'm doing, which is largely about the drama of the human soul. That's about people being, betrayed and crucified and crippled by life more than it is about guys getting punched out. So the fact that he could also do the superhero stuff was a plus, but I really was attracted to his artwork because he got the sort of subtle human nuance.
So from after I finished Second Coming, I don't know why people were I think people who were up in arms would be surprised that Jesus also actually comes off as the best person in the comic book.
Yeah,
is that your original intent? And
yeah, it's a very pro-Christ comic, and that's kind of what I meant by people can just withhold judgment to the point where they actually can read it. They might have a different perspective on it than they do based upon what people who haven't read it are saying about it. So yeah, but it's very much. I understand why the gatekeepers to Christianity, why the institutions that have been built around Christianity would feel threatened by it, regardless of what the content was, because it challenges their ability to control the narrative. They look at Christ as like their intellectual property, as if they're Marvel and Jesus Christ is their Iron Man. The idea that somebody outside sort of the evangelical or outside the Orthodox community of American Christianity would dare have an opinion or tell a story about Jesus without their, without their narrative, without their theological framework, was very scary to them. And it should be, because they are on extremely thin ice theologically. Most of them don't know what they're talking about. And their whole approach to Christianity is a house of cards built upon a very erroneous interpretation of the New Testament. So they should be rightfully worried about other people talking about it, because it only takes one person to blow on the house of cards and send it all tumbling down, and which is precisely what I hope happens as a result of this comic, that people will begin reading the Bible for themselves and figuring out where they have been misled in the way they were taught about it when they were young.
So how did that, does that, can you talk about your newest book that's scheduled to come out, Billionaire Island? Where, what's the gist of that? Where did where did you get where did that come from? The concept, where did the idea for that come from?
It came from, obviously the wealth inequality is a huge problem, and it's one that's probably going to doom the human race, because all of the resources that could be spent on dealing with things like global warming and COVID-19 and pandemics are instead going to buying private islands in Dubai or escape yachts. And so there's a fundamental existential problem with the human race there, where we're extracting more wealth from the planet ever before, and in doing so endangering the environment of that planet in a way we've never done before. And almost none of the benefits of pulling that wealth out of the planet are going towards saving us from the problems that pulling the wealth out of the planet is creating. So that's kind of the inspiration of like, what does it mean that we send all of our money, all the world's resources, to tax shelters in like the Bahamas or Guam, or in this case, Billionaire Island. And more specifically, I was reading these articles about, billionaires building bug out shelters in like New Zealand, or, plans to build like an artificial island off the coast of California, in San Francisco Bay, where billionaires could be tax exempt. Like all the tech billionaires could live there and not pay any taxes, and then just take a motorboat to work in Silicon Valley in the morning, and live in this offline island paradise where they don't have to worry about any of the problems the rest of us face created by their hoarding. So those were kind of the mutual inspirations for Billionaire Island. And in a lot of ways, it to me was like kind of like almost a reverse Atlas Shrugged, like what that would really look like if and I also, I think, in comic books, we're told that the billionaires are all like looking out for us. Bruce Wayne spends his fortune like battling criminal organizations and saving the earth from alien invaders and whatnot. Tony Stark spends his fortune defending the planet, and giving like a headquarters to the Avengers. In reality, someone with that much wealth and capital would probably just much more cost effectively worry about like building themselves like a Goldfinger escape shuttle that they could escape from the rest of the planet on, and leave the rest of us to hang. So I wanted to
oh no, I don't know if you saw, it was like when the first when the whole COVID-19 thing started. I think it was, I forget who it was, but he like posted a picture of him on his boat out in the harbor saying, everybody stay safe.
Yeah,
his
right.
Big yacht.
A little different, yeah. But yeah, and that's kind of what Billionaire Island is. It's a massive escape yacht. But it's the idea is that they're going to stay on this island and escape the end of the world, which is coming soon. And it's about a journalist and a disgruntled soldier of fortune who seek them out on this island looking for answers and or revenge.
So do we have any more of the getting kind of moving back to the Edgar Allan Snifter of Terror? Do we have any more of the serial monster stories coming?
I think there's one that I've written that hasn't come out yet. I've only written 4 of them, so I'm not sure how many are out yet. But hopefully, I'll write some more.
Yeah. So, you just finished up Wonder Twins. How was that? Again, that's another property that they probably let you have full range on. And again, it was a nice mix of funny stuff, but also there was a deeper meaning to the story. Can you talk a little bit about writing the Wonder Twins, and did that start in Cave Carson?
Wonder Twins?
Yeah.
No, I'm not aware of any crossover with Cave Carson. But if there was, I didn't read it before I began writing Wonder Twins. But it was really Brian Michael Bendis who came to me and approached me because he was curating the Wonder line of comics. He approached me about about writing Wonder Twins, and I was pretty sold immediately because I always kind of liked the Wonder Twins. I mean, I remember them from when I was a kid watching Super Friends on Saturday mornings. And the thing I kind of liked about them was that they were the superheroes who were allowed to make mistakes. They were, the kids, so they were sort of goofballs and would screw things up, or Gleek would stick a banana in the supercomputer. So I like the idea of writing superheroes who didn't have to be perfect, who didn't have to have the answer for everything, and be freer to ask questions. I also thought that they were sort of like a metaphor for the post-millennial generation. That here are these kids, they've just arrived on the planet, and we're sort of expecting them to fix it all. It's like, have fun, kids. We've screwed up the planet now. Find a way to fix it.
I know you have, I believe you have a Swamp Thing story coming out in one of the Giants. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm doing a serialized Swamp Thing story in the Giants.
Are there any characters in the DC universe that you would really like to write that you haven't written already?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do a Booster Gold series. Also, a longer Superman. Even though I've written some Superman backups, and Superman obviously shows up as a character in Wonder Twins. He's probably my favorite DC character, just because I think he's such a template of philosophy of he's like a sort of a template of stoicism and sort of internal fortitude. And I think that's his real superpower. His real superpower isn't like strength or the flight. It's being able to keep it all together, despite the fact that he has all this power. He doesn't go crazy and rule the place. It's like self-control is his most impressive superpower. So I would love to write a Superman series. Also, Green Lantern, I like it just because it's more of a science fiction based series. So you could really tell a lot of different stories based upon the fact that you can leave the Earth more with Green Lantern than you can with other characters.
Well, speaking of Green Lantern, I enjoyed your Green Lantern Huckleberry Hound one shot. I mean, I'm going to say it again. It was a great story, but it had a deeper meaning that people needed to hear and needed to read.
Well, thanks. Yeah, in a lot of ways, it was sort of like an unofficial post addendum to Snagglepuss, because the idea is that the Huckleberry Hound in that story is the son of the Huckleberry Hound, who was, one of the featured characters in the Snagglepuss comic. So it was nice to be able to sort of revisit that world, albeit in sort of a crossover with Green Lantern, and it thematically sort of belongs to that world because it is about like confronting the cost to your own privilege that you have to do to take a stand against the abuse of power.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? I know you're also currently writing Judge Dredd?
No, Red Judge Dredd was like a year ago, but yeah, Red Sonja. I'm doing right now. I'm scheduled to do 24 issues of Red Sonja. I'm very proud of that. Bob Q is doing the art currently. Mirko Kolak did the art on issues 1 through 12, and now Bob Q is taking over. So yeah, I'm very proud of that series, and the reason why I signed on for that is because Dynamite allowed me to talk about something. This is sort of what attracts me to comics. It's like it allows me to talk about things that I really care about. And Dynamite allowed me to write Red Sonja based upon these stories in ancient history, largely taken from like the histories of Herodotus, but also some stories sprinkled in from like the Jewish Midrash and other ancient sources. So they let me do my own sort of take on ancient history using Red Sonja as the template. So I'm really happy with it. And I think people who enjoyed God is Disappointed in You would also really like Red Sonja, because it's got a lot of that same sort of sensibility of reinterpreting ancient history through a modern lens.
And we'll be seeing any more Second Coming?
Oh yeah, we're doing at least another 6 issues, and hopefully a lot more than that of Second Coming. In fact, I just turned in the script for issue number 10 today.
Nice. Well, we'll let you go. Please stay safe. Social distance.
Yeah,
and
always.
all that. But yeah, thanks again for taking the time to talk with me and redo the interview.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think it was probably better the second time around anyway. I think I've had a chance to think it over a little.
I'm also probably not as starstruck as I probably was at that time. That book you wrote? That was cool.
Well, thanks. Always
All
a
right,
pleasure.
well, thanks very much. All right, thanks.
All right, bye.
Catch you later. All right, bye.